2019 was an interesting year for many reasons, and I'm not just talking about the weird spree of doorbell lickers. We had some great films and TV shows like Endgame, Joker, Lion King, Us, John Wick 3, but also some shocking failures, including X-Men, Terminator, Game of Thrones, and Star Wars, all of which were once blockbuster brands. And then right at the end of the year, there was Cats, the Broadway sensation, winner of 7 Tony Awards, the 4th longest running Broadway show in history. By 2012, the show had grossed $3.5 billion worldwide, and yet, the film adaptation was so bad, they had to release a re-edited version of the graphics only days after its original theatrical release. The film had an amazing cast, but only made back a tiny fraction of its production budget, and has been mercilessly ridiculed by critics and the public. An award-winning show to adapt, an all-star cast, this film should have been impossible to mess up. Then there was Charlie's Angels, Batwoman, Hellboy, the Lego Movie 2, IPs that had backstory and name recognition to build off of. And all of these either outright failed or were far inferior to their predecessors. So what happened in 2019? Why did we have successful brand after successful brand push out mediocre films that felt like the film version of a Picasso painting? I think a good explanation comes from looking back at the global financial crisis of 2008, which taught us the valuable lesson:
your overconfidence is your weakness.
Let's explore how market overconfidence leads to a lack of regulation and oversight, and how that applies to the films of 2019, and how productions can hopefully avoid these kinds of failures in the future. When it comes to a studio deciding to produce a film, most decisions are market decisions. How much money do they expect said film to generate? How popular is the franchise? Is it so popular they expect nearly anything they make will be profitable? And market decisions are affected by confidence. Confidence in a bull market, confidence in the popularity of your product, maybe confidence in your actors, directors, writers, or your production team. The problem is when confidence levels get too high, we stop paying attention to the risks. The global financial crisis was the most serious financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, I can't explain what caused the recession any better than has already been done by the film The Big Short. Now, you'd expect a film about finance would be dry and boring, but surprisingly it's not. The Big Short explains the how and why of what happened in the financial markets in such a way that anyone can keep up, using celebrity asides to explain the more complex ideas. Now, the TLDR is, lenders were too overconfident in the market and made a ton of loans that never should have been made in the first place. Lehman Brothers, big banks, subprime lenders all decided, we don't need checks and balances. We can trust that the system won't fail. If we're not doing exactly the right thing, it's okay. Everyone else will prop us up. We are too big to fail. Now, enough about economics, let's talk about Star Wars. From April 17, 2011 until the beginning of 2019, Game of Thrones was king of TV. Adapted from the incomplete epic fantasy series by George R.R. Martin, the series drew attention because of its overt sexuality, violence, and promise that no character was safe from an unexpected death. Things were great for 7 years. Yes, we probably could have gone without the penis torture, the brother and sister incest rape on the grave of their son, and endless unfortunate Sansa situations. But overall, seasons 1 through 7 would recommend. 9 out of 10 stars would definitely watch again. Then The showrunners, David and Dan, decided to abandon the relatively sane pace they had mastered in seasons 1 through 7 in favor of a new character-changing twist every episode. Even when those changes really deserved more time to develop, Khaleesi going insane, killing the main villains, achieving a 4-season-long build-up to a relationship, and then immediately abandoning it. Now, yes, there is a unique issue when talking about Game of Thrones. They ran out of source material. George R.R. Martin hasn't finished his series yet, and so the showrunners had to strike off on their own to finish up the story. Are they just not as competent without good source material? Perhaps, but the television series has long been moving away from Martin's books and including more and more original material. And interviews after the point make it pretty obvious that the decision was made by the showrunners. David said in an interview, HBO would have been happy for the show to keep going, to have more episodes in the final season. So why were the directors given so much leeway to do whatever they wanted? Because everyone was overconfident, leading to a lack of regulation and oversight. The show and its writers were on top and could call every shot they wanted. Remind you of anything? Game of Thrones had won 4 Primetime Emmys for Outstanding Drama, won 2 for Writing, and was nominated for 18 more awards over its 9-year run. HBO could have said, no, there's too much story left, too many important character arcs that need to be finished. Stretch this out, fill an entire season with solid episodes. But there was no reason to doubt their showrunners, so there was no oversight, and one truly awful season completely colored our view of the previous 8. Towards the end of the final season of Game of Thrones, a petition to HBO was started on change.org. It described the showrunners as woefully incompetent writers and demanded a remake of the 8th season of Game of Thrones in a manner that makes sense. As of this video, the petition has 1.8 million signatures, and people are still signing over a year after it was posted. Richard Roper, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, says, "Over the last 25 plus years, I've reviewed thousands of movies and dozens of TV shows, and I don't think I've ever seen the level of fan, and to a lesser degree, critical, vitriol leveled at Game of Thrones in recent weeks." Now, enough about Game of Thrones, let's talk about Star Wars.
For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
In 1997, Lucas released the 20-year anniversary special edition back into theaters. The special edition gave Gen X and Millennials the chance to see the entire original trilogy in theaters. It was also released in an awesome box set with special features that my brother and I rewatched almost as much as Lord of the Rings special features. But it also introduced the idea of changing the original, a topic that still remains a sore spot to this day. The special edition changed the movie that fans knew, all because Lucas, the creator, decided that he had the power to do so.
That sort of thing. But at the same time, I was frustrated, and I got the film finished somehow, but it wasn't finished to the level that I'd want it to be finished.
Star Wars: A New Hope was nominated for 10 Academy Awards and won 6 of them. Empire and Jedi continued to be nominated for awards, though the only win was sound mixing for Empire Strikes Back. Even so, it was clear that this trilogy was a success, and it cemented Lucas as a writer, director, and visionary in the industry. But did he become overconfident? Lucas was a staunch advocate for preserving art. He even testified before Congress in 1988 about the importance of preserving film in its original form. He said, "In the future, it will become even easier for old negatives to become lost and be replaced by new altered negatives. This would be a great loss to our society. our cultural history must not be allowed to be rewritten. How did this happen? Lucas went from saying the original shouldn't be messed with to completely destroying his own original works. And making changes to the original would inevitably alienate part of the fan base, making it not just a decision going against his personal values, but one that doesn't make financial sense either. Did Lucas become overconfident, thinking the fans would love whatever he did? And did everyone else become overconfident in their trust of Lucas? Was there any oversight on the decisions he was making? Was there anyone who questioned him at all? And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching The People vs. George Lucas. It's an absolutely fascinating documentary about the fans of Star Wars and how those fans reacted to the changes that Lucas has made to the franchise over the years. Fast forward past the Lucas era and into the House of Mouse. And if there is one single sentence that sums up the issues the franchise is currently facing, it's market overconfidence leads to a lack of regulation and oversight. Once you delve into the making of the sequel trilogy, it's extremely obvious that Disney had no plans in place. They bought a $4 billion company and were confident that anything they put out would be profitable. And to some extent, they were right. The Force Awakens is the #1 domestic box office earner of all time. It beat Avengers Endgame and Avatar. It earned almost double that of The Phantom Menace. In fact, all of the new Star Wars films, except one, have been pretty close to the financial successes that Disney hoped for when they bought the franchise. But their overconfidence was their undoing. The films may have initially made a lot of money, but they were made in a way so that much of the fan base lost interest. The Force Awakens may have been entertaining, but fans easily saw the many terrible plot points that it introduced. And sure, maybe the average moviegoer loved seeing depressed Luke moping around, but how many fans actually enjoyed that? 116,000 people were so dissatisfied, they took the time to create accounts and sign a petition to remake the entire movie. Those were the hardcore fans, the ones who bought all the merch and saw the films a dozen times in theaters. Toy sales are down, the sequel trilogy is now more often mocked than praised, and even when something goes right, like the Baby Yoda craze, Disney has been totally unprepared to capitalize on the popularity. The evidence is abundantly clear. Disney was not at all prepared for this franchise. So how can productions avoid failures like these in the future? The obvious answer is to not get cocky, to realize that no matter how big a franchise is, it can be ruined by just a single bad story. Corporations need to realize that name recognition is not enough. Basing your film off an award-winning book is not enough. Hiring popular actors is not enough. The story must be good. Costuming, special effects, everything else comes second to storyline. The oversight and regulation that the film industry needs is for its writers. The world's greatest detective getting tricked and manipulated into hating someone who had just risked his life to save the planet? That hate disappearing because the dude says your mom's name? Or what about Birds of Prey? Where was the oversight on this film? It was written by women, produced by women, starring women, and celebrated in the media for those facts. But did they put such dedication into the storyline and character development? Or did they expect the film to succeed because they were overconfident in the way it represented the female empowerment movement? The storyline of Justice League was laughable, confusing, and rushed. It was yet another film that was expected to do well simply off the name recognition of its characters. What about the Batwoman TV show? Batgirl is an incredibly iconic and popular comic character with tons of name recognition. The show was praised for its LGBTQ inclusiveness, but what about its story? It wound up with a 13% audience score and the lead actress quitting after just a single season. Example after example after example of poorly written stories that were somehow expected to succeed simply because the creators believed in the franchise. Rian Johnson came in with the confidence that he was going to flip fans on their faces and create the Star Wars that nobody knew they wanted. And Disney let him do it because they were confident in the product. JJ came back for Rise of Skywalker to try to right the ship, and somehow created a story with more plot issues than The Last Jedi. But now, something was different, because now Disney knew there was a problem. They had seen the film backlash and merchandise sales falling. As anyone who has ever worked a day in their life can tell you, those who are succeeding get left alone, and those who are struggling to meet expectations have to suddenly deal with managers and supervisors inspecting their every move. Because the equation works in reverse, too. Lack of confidence leads to over-regulation and oversight. Find any business owner who was in business during the 2008 financial crisis. Ask them what it was like trying to get a loan during those years. It was awful. Regulations were high, demands were high, and rates were high. The break in the market and downward spiral in the economy caused the entire financial system to enter a period of never-before-seen regulations. These were, for the most part, completely necessary to make sure something like the crisis wouldn't happen again, and most of those regulations are still in place today. But in the short term, for those who had to go through the regulations and oversight for the first time, it was, again, awful. And from what we have been able to tell, JJ had to suffer through a lot of regulation. Reports of multiple versions of scenes being filmed, so they could do test screenings and try to workshop the most profitable film. Reports of many last-minute reshoots, and that the film cut we saw wasn't even the cut JJ had worked on. Because for some reason, the regulation and oversight never seems to come at the beginning of the pre-production phase where it would be the most helpful. Solo was rewritten and reshot last minute to try to save the story. Rogue One was rewritten and reshot to try to save the story. The same with Justice League, the same with Rise of Skywalker. Filmmakers need to realize where their power comes from. It's all from the story and the characters. Instead of spending $20 million on reshoots, they could have spent an extra $500,000 to have multiple writers edit the scripts beforehand. Now, for all his poor directing and producing and writing decisions, it should be said that J.J. Abrams is a classy guy that hasn't used the reactions to Rise of Skywalker as an opportunity to pass the blame onto Disney, Rian Johnson, or anyone else but himself. In every interview, he simply states that they did what they felt was right, that they knew whatever choices they made would be contentious because the fans were already so divided, and that he was proud of the product that they had made. And not only was JJ dealing with annoying, overzealous corporate overregulation, but he was also tasked with clearing up the rough points of Rian Johnson's mostly fan-hated film. That's got to be miserable, knowing this movie you're spending months on is a desperate attempt to dig a series out of a hole, trying not only to please the fans, but also the Disney execs who have completely lost confidence in the product they spent $4 billion to acquire and another $2 billion to work into a new trilogy. We've talked about several movies, and there are dozens more we could explore. Movie after movie is being made based on overconfidence of the product. With seemingly no regulation or oversight of the script, the single most important factor of a film's success. Let's hope the film industry finally wakes up to the problem and learns why these films are failing while others succeed. Because it's not all gloom and doom. The Marvel production team never got cocky. they have had solid scripts, engaging storyline, and believable character development in almost every single film. Even DC can make a good film when they have the right creative team in charge. So Lucasfilm Disney learns from their mistakes and starts the next trilogy with a strong script and solid outline for the entire trilogy. And who knows, the franchise starting over as a baby could lead to an era even better than the one we grew up with. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please help share this and get us to 1,000 subscribers. It's been a long 2 years to get this far, but we're only 300 away now. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.